My mom called me selfish for not giving my brother my money, so I showed her what real selfishness looks like. I refused to give my brother all of my money, a pattern that had been going on since we were kids. In response, my mother branded me as selfish, the worst possible label in our family's dictionary. So I finally showed her just how selfish I can really be. My entire childhood is marked by one phrase, a constant, echoing refrain that followed me from room to room. Stop being so selfish, Maggie. It was my mother's favorite weapon, a tool she used to shape me, control me, and ensure that my needs always came second to my younger brother's wants. I have this one vivid memory from when I was 9. I had spent a whole weekend setting up a yard sale. I gathered all my old toys, books I'd outgrown, and clothes that didn't fit anymore. I made signs, I haggled with neighbors, and by the end of Sunday, I had made almost $100 in crumpled ones and fives. It was the most money I had ever had in my life, and I was so proud. That night, at the dinner table, I triumphantly announced my earnings. I expected praise, a pat on the back, maybe even a wow. Maggie, that's amazing. Instead, my mom just looked at me, her expression flat, and asked, well, why didn't you give some of that money to your brother? My brother, Trent, was 8 at the time. He hadn't helped with the yard sale. He had spent the weekend playing video games. But a wave of guilt immediately washed over me, hot and familiar. I was being selfish. I hadn't even thought of him. I pulled out my little wad of cash and handed Trent a $20 bill. But instead of thanking me, he just looked at our mom with a practiced, disappointed expression. That's when she said it, her voice sharp and disappointed. Maggie, stop being so selfish. So, I ended up giving him 80 of my hard-earned $97. On some level, a quiet, 9-year-old part of me knew it wasn't right. It was my money. I had worked for it. But her approval mattered more to me than my own feelings, more than fairness. That single incident set the precedent for the next 18 years of my life. Fast forward to last week, when I turned 27. For the first time in my life, I've finally achieved some semblance of financial stability. I have a solid savings account, a growing 401k, and a credit score I'm not ashamed of. This might not sound like a huge deal to most people, but for me, a recovering shopaholic who spent her early 20s racking up credit card debt, it's a monumental achievement. And, of course, the first thing I thought when I looked at my healthy bank account was, I don't want to be selfish with this. I wanted to share my success. At my job, there was this guy, an Airbnb expert, who was looking for an investor for a new project. It was a house renovation, and in exchange for the initial investment, the investor would receive a significant cut of the passive income every year for life. It was a golden opportunity, the kind that could set someone up financially. I could have, and probably should have, taken the opportunity for myself. But all I could think about was Trent. He was still struggling, bouncing from one low-wage job to another, and this could be his ticket to a better life. This, I told myself, would be the ultimate act of selflessness. This would be the grand gesture that would finally, once and for all, prove to my mother that I was not a selfish person. I drove to my mom's house for my birthday dinner, the details of the Airbnb investment ready to present, my heart filled with a nervous, hopeful excitement. I was about to change my brother's life. I was about to earn my mother's approval. But of course, my hopes were shattered the second I arrived. Trent opened the door before I could even knock. He didn't say hello. He didn't say happy birthday. He just looked at me with an expectant, slightly annoyed expression. Did Mom tell you my laptop broke a few months ago? He asked. I just stared at him, completely blank. I had no idea what he was talking about. He let out a loud, theatrical sigh and turned his head, yelling into the house.
Mom.
I told you Maggie would forget to buy me a new MacBook. I heard footsteps, and suddenly my mom was standing beside him, her arms crossed, her face a mask of disappointment. Maggie, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. If you're going to be so selfish and not buy your younger brother the things he needs, then you don't even deserve to have a nice job or a nice car or anything. I was so stunned I couldn't even speak. I had come here to offer him a life-changing financial opportunity, and they were berating me on the doorstep for not buying him a $2,000 laptop that I knew nothing about. Before I could even begin to explain, before I could tell them about the Airbnb deal that would make him an extra $5,000 a year, Trent chimed in, his voice laced with a smug sense of entitlement. You know, Maggie, I've always protected you, he said. Remember the bullies in high school? I did remember. I remembered because he never, ever let me forget. In high school, I was relentlessly tormented by a group of older girls. And one single time, my brother had told them to back off. They did, but it only lasted for a day before they were back at it. But in his and my mother's retelling of the story, he was a brave Roman soldier who had single-handedly saved me from certain doom, a debt I could apparently never repay. And I know this might sound pathetic, but in that moment, standing on their porch, I wasn't even angry. I just felt a familiar sting of tears in my eyes. The disappointment was so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my chest. My fingers clutched the brand new iPhone I had bought for my mom for her upcoming birthday, still in its box in my pocket. As I was about to just give it to them, to try and buy my way back into their good graces, my mom kept going. "You know, your brother just got fired," she said, her voice filled with accusation. "From his job as a cashier at the Quick Check. 10 years of employment, down the drain. How do you plan to support us during this difficult time?" In an instant, my sadness curdled into a hot, unfamiliar anger. I stared at their entitled, expectant faces. Not once during this entire exchange had they invited me inside. They hadn't wished me a happy birthday. They hadn't asked me how I was. They had just stood there, on their side of the threshold, making demands. I thought about my friends' families, how I had been welcomed into their homes with warm hugs and genuine smiles. I had never seen them yell at each other, or make each other cry, or treat one another like a family slave, an ATM with legs. I took a deep breath, pushing the tears back down. "Did you guys get me anything for my birthday?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. My brother rolled his eyes, so hard I'm surprised they didn't fall out of his head. "It's always about you, isn't it, Maggie?" he sneered. I just kept a completely stoic expression on my face, waiting, while he disappeared into the house to retrieve my gift. He came back and handed me a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a discount coupon for a buy one get one free milkshake at Burger King. I'm lactose intolerant. They've known this my entire life. That was it. That was the final straw. The lifetime of tiny cuts had finally bled me dry. I kept my gifts, the iPhone for my mom, and the investment opportunity for my brother, to myself. I just turned around, my back straight, and walked back to my car without another word. The second I turned the corner, out of their line of sight, I broke down. Great, racking sobs that shook my whole body. I thought back to all the times I had given in, all the times I had chosen their happiness over my own well-being. And for the first time in my 27 years, I actually let myself feel the anger. The deep, righteous, long overdue anger. And for once, I wanted to do something about it. I turned the car around. I parked on the street, left my mom's new iPhone in the glove compartment, and walked back up the driveway, my steps filled with a newfound, terrifying purpose. Trent answered the door again, a smug look on his face. "Glad you're done with your little temper tantrum," he said. "Now let me ask again. Where are our gifts?" "Hey, Trent," I interrupted, my voice calm and even. "Who pays for your phone bill?" He looked confused. "Mom's boyfriend, Dave," he answered, a little uncertainly. I knew he was confused. "What about your gas? Your health insurance? Who covers your weekend food deliveries and your premium coffee subscription?" The smirk was completely wiped from his face. That's when my mom came to the door, drawn by the change in tone. "Hey, Mom," I said, turning to her. "Who pays for you guys' rent? Who pays off the car insurance every month?" They both turned to look at each other, and I saw the exact moment the realization dawned on their faces, a slow-motion explosion of confusion and dawning horror. You see, I had been playing a long game, a game of quiet, desperate appeasement. I had told Trent that my mom's boyfriend, Dave, was covering his bills because I knew Trent didn't like Dave, and I thought it would help them get along if he thought Dave was being generous. And to my mom, who was constantly on the verge of kicking Trent out for being a freeloader, I had told her that Trent was secretly paying his own way, that he was more responsible than she thought. The truth? I was paying for everything. All of it. For years. I had been their silent, invisible safety net, and they had never even noticed. I didn't even stick around to explain. I just watched the dawning realization on their faces, turned around, and left. And even though I felt like a total badass in that moment, it was still incredibly hard. I spent the entire night curled up on my couch, bawling my eyes out, mourning the family I wished I had. When I woke up the next morning, my phone had been bombarded with dozens of texts and missed calls. The first voicemail from my mother was angry, demanding an explanation. The second was threatening, talking about how I had betrayed their trust. By the 10th, they were practically begging me to talk to them, to discuss this rationally. It was the first time in my entire life I had ever truly stood up to them, and the power shift was so abrupt it was dizzying. While a part of me wanted to savor the moment, the practical, responsible side of my brain was already calculating the financial fallout. I had been supporting their lifestyle for years. A quick tally on my calculator app revealed a shocking number. I had been spending nearly $2,000 a month on them. $2,000 that could have gone toward my own future, my own home, even that Airbnb investment I had so foolishly tried to give away. The calls kept coming all day. By evening, my mom's tone had shifted from anger to a pathetic, wheezing pity, claiming they'd be evicted if I didn't fix this misunderstanding right away. I turned my phone on silent. For a brief moment the next morning, as I scrolled through the increasingly desperate texts about final notices from utility companies, I felt that familiar, Pavlovian twinge of guilt. My finger hovered over the call button. I could end this. I could just give in one more time. But then I remembered the look on their faces on my birthday, demanding gifts while I stood on their doorstep like a delivery driver. I remembered the Burger King coupon. I decided to take a personal day from work. I spent the morning methodically untangling my finances from theirs, canceling automatic payments, changing passwords. And as I did, I realized with a jolt that without supporting them, I could not only afford to make that Airbnb investment myself, I could do it with money to spare. In the middle of my number crunching, my coworker, Jamie, called. She was a kind, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who I had always admired. When I vaguely explained that I was dealing with a family emergency, she insisted on taking me to lunch. Over sandwiches, the whole story just came pouring out of me. The yard sale, the years of being the family ATM, the disastrous birthday visit. With each revelation, her eyes grew wider. Finally, she put down her fork and said, "Maggie, that's not normal family behavior. That's financial abuse." The words hit me like a physical blow. Abuse. I had never thought of it that way. It was just the way things were. Jamie gently explained that what I'd been experiencing wasn't just occasional selfishness, it was a systematic pattern of exploitation, normalized for me since childhood. When I got home, I finally called my mom back. I kept my voice steady as I explained that I would no longer be covering any of their expenses. When she started crying about how they'd end up homeless, I calmly suggested that Trent could get another job and that she could apply for assistance programs. Her tone switched instantly from pitiful to venomous. She accused me of abandoning them, of being a cold, heartless daughter. But this time, her guilt trips just bounced off me. "I love you both," I said simply, "but I can't keep doing this." Then I hung up and blocked their numbers again. The next 2 weeks were the most peaceful of my adult life. I finalized the Airbnb investment. I started therapy with a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. I even joined a hiking group and met people who seemed to like me for my personality, not my wallet. 3 weeks after I cut them off, a letter arrived from Trent. It started with accusations, but then the tone shifted. He admitted that maybe they had been depending on me a little too much and asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop, a neutral location. Mom arrived first, looking worn and tired. Trent joined her a few minutes later, wearing a uniform from a local grocery store. He had gotten a job. The conversation was awkward. They were still behind on rent and facing eviction. After a long, silent moment, I looked at them, at the years of hurt and resentment sitting between us, and I made a decision. "I can help you," I said, pulling out my checkbook. "This one last time, but I have conditions." Their faces lit up until I explained my terms. I would pay the $2,000 directly to their landlord, and in exchange, they would attend 3 family therapy sessions with me. Mom immediately balked, but Trent, to my utter shock, nudged her. "It's just 3 sessions, Mom," he muttered. "We need the money." The first therapy session was a predictable disaster. Mom spent the entire hour defending her parenting choices, and Trent mostly sulked. But our therapist, Dr. Chun, was a master. She didn't push, but she didn't let their revisionist history go unchallenged. The second session was marginally better. Trent actually admitted that maybe he had been a little entitled. By the third session, something had genuinely shifted. When Dr. Chen asked us to each share one thing we appreciated about the others, my mom, after a long, tense silence, said she was proud of how responsible I'd become. It was possibly the first genuine compliment she'd given me in my entire life. I expected that to be the end of it, but a week later, Trent asked to meet me for coffee. Just the 2 of us. He looked uncomfortable, but determined. "Dr. Chun made me realize some stuff," he said, staring into his cup. "I guess I was always jealous of you. You had everything figured out. So when Mom took my side, it felt good." He looked up at me then. "Anyway, I want to pay you back. For everything." I was so stunned I nearly spilled my coffee. He insisted, pulling out an envelope with $200 in cash. "It's a start," he said. Things with my mom remained complicated. She stopped going to therapy, but she also stopped asking for money. Our relationship settled into a series of stiff, civil text messages. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't a war, and for now, that was enough. 6 months later, my Airbnb investment started paying dividends. I started dating again, and met Brandon, a kind, frugal art teacher who I could actually talk to about money without feeling shame. A year later, he proposed on a camping trip with a simple, beautiful ring that was perfect for me. The wedding planning was a new test. But with Brandon's support, I held my ground. We planned a small, 50-person ceremony in a botanical garden, the wedding we wanted, not the one my mother thought we should have. The day before the wedding, Trent handed me an envelope with $1,500 in cash, a wedding gift, he said, and another payment on his debt. I hugged him, a real, genuine hug, for what might have been the first time in our adult lives. Our wedding day was perfect. And during the reception, my mom gave a toast. It was short, a little awkward, but in it, she acknowledged how proud she was of the life I had built for myself. A year later, I was pregnant. And when our daughter, Ellie, was born, I watched my mother hold her for the first time, tears streaming down her face, and I felt a complex, messy, but undeniable sense of hope. The cycle was broken. I had a family now, one that I was determined to build on a foundation of respect and unconditional love, not transactions. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real.
And it was mine.